August Kiona Boy Paul is going to do a reading of a poem for us.
Paul.
Better late than never.
An fiannas fear go deireadh.
An fiannas fear deireadh, sé díreach. Bhí sa caint le Danny Mikey Maidin, agus bhí mar a caint hanacle le a lútar go minic as gailing, agus seanachil sa bhuiinn beidir le háir sa rudatá san ócáid speisialta arsúla bhainneog. Ach, dúra mar aber seo héad ceann, cadíad na trí rud nach féidir túntaíomh a thuairt leis. Three things that cannot be trusted. Agus seo hé mar a háin gailing na mún, sláinte an duine chríanha, lábra sa díide, agus gáire an tasannig. Digan sibh sin, ní gádum is dócha iad eistriú. Ach, siad na trí rud ach go háide. Now, I hope to read you two poems, some verses from Rosc, Catha na Mumhan, and also Órán Dóchais, chun príomh nua. Rosc, Catha na Mumhan. Now, this is known also as Béarla as the battle cry of Munster. It was the anthem of opposition to British colonial rule in Ireland over the centuries. Indeed, it became known as the anthem for the entire Jacobite movement, and it holds a revered place in Jacobite poetry. Of course, one thing that occurs to me in relating these events with what's happening today, if I can allude to that for a second, we must keep in mind that Britain never, ever had the right to one scintilla of Irish soil, north, south, east or west. Never ever. In their pantheon, of course, might is right and all that entails. And it's perhaps not surprising when that so-called superiority or might is maybe challenged in the fabricated argument that we hear today in the media with the EU. They're once again willing to break international law. But Shin Rod Goil Tahi Ako Er. They're well used to that, and we know that to our cost on this island. In any case, the name Jacobite derives from the Latin for James, that is, Jacobus. James II was the last Stuart king of Great Britain and Ireland. He was king for only 3 years, from 1685 to 1688, and he had converted to Catholicism in 1669 and ceased attending Anglican ceremonies from 1676. Now, I won't go into it in any great detail. He was deposed in 1688 by none other than his own daughter, Mary II, and her husband, William of Orange, aka William III, or as known also in Ireland as King Billy. William of Orange also happened to be a nephew of James II, and perhaps of more significance is that he was a Protestant and a major player in political developments in the continent. He led, King Billy that is, the military opposition to the Catholic King Louis XIV of France. So James II was supported by Catholics and by royalists, and he believed in the divine right of kings to rule their subjects, and he was opposed by Protestants and by parliamentarians as they wanted to share out of power between king and parliament. Now, this is in the 17th century. But one last note before I read you the battle cry of Munster, Rosc, Catha na Mumhan. I just want to remind you that William III, or King Billy himself, he arrived in Ireland on the 14th of June, 1690. And James and William, of course, met head-on the 1st of July, 1690, along with their combined entourage of 50,000 soldiers on the banks of the Boyne River. William won the day. The success of the Glorious Revolution, so-called, was cemented. The reign of James II, it was well and truly over, and with it any prospect of peaceful political coexistence of Catholicism and Protestantism. So, in any case, leaving the rest of the detail there, just to get back to what I'm going to read you, the battle cry of Munster, Rosc, Catha na Mumhan, is a slow air that became the anthem of opposition to colonial rule, not alone in Munster, but eventually worldwide. It became the anthem of the Jacobites, and it holds a central place in the history of literature and particularly Jacobite poetry. It provided the melody for the Dominic Behan rebel song, Come Out Ye Black and Tans. It has been recorded by a succession of internationally acclaimed performers, including the RTE singers, Dole of Tones, and most Shannon singers of note. The composer of this historic masterpiece was Piers MacGaralt, a farmer and poet born in 1709 in this area outside the village of Ballymacoda, and who was forced to convert from Catholicism to Protestantism in order to retain the family farm, a personal crisis which he addresses in his other poem, and many of his Comóradh Charid Peishkele. So Piers MacGaralt, who wrote the battle cry of Munster, Rosc on the Moon, lived from 1709 to 1791. So Shine on Tudor, agus anish Tam Conandana, a lev amach div. Now ta anachid vers iawn ach ni hwyr me div ach beder rá verse da fad. Rosc Catha na Moon. Dahanias féin gan vreag ocht is anafe hetisch tail le kuan chanan an éan go séiseach suic go gasach me heser glé gan ghruin. Messen go suacht an bhuan an uim is da marin go dúch do chrú na mór. Torran na down le slassen na laung a taingt go town in our gown court. Tá lasas an rain gach loi go neuin, ní taise don ré ní hen fé neul, tá baran na grev ag déanamh sceil nach fada vig gael in neven vroin. Messen gur suacht an bhuan an ceil, is da maran go dúach do chrú na dreon, Torran na down le slassen na laung go taingt go town in our gown fé heol. Tá íl mire agus áine óg, agus cléana an bhrinnel is áile snó, táid mílte agus tuile den dáin seo fós da siomh le buile go dáine an leon. Messen gur suacht an bhuan an ceil is da maran go dúach de chrú na dreon, Torran na down le slasse na laung, ag taingt an naul nar gown fé heol. Fuck me mercy. Rosc Catha na Moon, the anthem of anti-colonial rule for centuries, you could say. I just want to read one small piece of another one, and it is a poem that was written by a man who was born not very far from here. He's actually buried here in the graveyard in this relic near Shonvara. Agus an tanamata ná Osborne ó Havergy, Osborne Bergen. Now scrí sé an dáin seo ára an dóchas, sa bhliain 1930. Corcaíoch, he taught in UCC, Professor of Celtic in UCD. He taught in the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies, Scoil an Léing Éireannaigh. Tá sé Catha an Sam mar a Dedham, agus his years were 1873 to 1950. But in the period preceding 1916, there was great hope in the country. Lots of very unusual things were happening, like, for example, you could say the founding of the GAA, Comóradh Clas Gael, 1884 in Ruiséal, Micheál Císoig, and Shen Hochtig Nocha 3, Bunich Conran na Gaeilge, agus last year the Shin went out to be Douglas de Hida, Owen MacNeil, Owen O'Grownig, Thomas O'Neill Ruiséal, agus Martian there. Don't forget the third very significant event in that very hopeful period. It was actually the founding of the Irish universities, Scoil na Héireann. It was founded by the Irish Universities Act in 1908, and the NUI was formed, and the Irish language became a fully recognized academic subject of study for BA, MA, PhD, etc. Shortly afterwards. Three very important events. And around that time, this poem was composed by an Taverginach. Agus tá sé seo ólas go má ag gachéine goibh sin seo tám cinnte, mar bhíoh sé grins na cláistí saoraigh agus bhí mist á chana go miúnas go minic agus sin a fálam na Gaeilge ins na déagah, árán dóchas. Song of Hope. Slán go deo le brónas buirt, slán gan bhuiil dar gaine dúirt. Canam le hedóchas, I dange vín na fóla gus seasamís go beover os cóir a tail. O canam le hedóchas, I dange vín na fóla gus seasamís go beover os cóir a tail. Ní bhem fasta lasc gan loil chráite cromha féin lag fuar, nart is brína hoige dar darach trí de gólan, is bunny míd an ciosan de fór na drein. Nart is brína hoige dar darach trí de gólan, is bunny míd an ciosan de fór na drein. Clanagael fé réim gan ruig besid séir is beirhid bua, lenne míd an lochran an lasar sin se roin, is ní hagaling go bheohuig a gró in ar nieg. Tá seo her olsige. Slán go deo le bron is buirt, slán gan bhfuil dar gaine dúirt go canam le hedóchas go las, I danga vín na fóla go seasamís go beover os cóir an tail. Canam le hedóchas go I danga vín na fóla go seasamís go beover os cóir an tail. Thank you very much for listening to my office. That's a